in the building tonight. Joe, you wanna take it away?
I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm excited. We talk about people that were instrumental in the beginning of WJCU, and it, of course, was WUJC at the time. So first in the batting line up here, we have Milt Roney. So Milt, first of all, thank you so much for coming tonight. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Milt Roney. I was the first director of the radio station from about 1967 until I graduated in 1969, and my job was to get the station licensed with the FCC, which is a big deal, and I got that done, and we got the station built, and I graduated, and I broadcast for about 5 minutes before I graduated, and that was it. So other people took over after that and kept it going all this time.
So how does it look compared to when you started this whole thing?
This part looks very similar, except that the control room was in there. We had something called the Gates Yard. I think it had 6 big knobs, and that was all. I mean, this thing has, I don't know how many, to control the different inputs. We had a table in there. That was our studio where we'd interview people, and that was it. Our transmitter was up about 3 floors up, and I was there when they put that antenna up back in '69. The buildings and grounds people wouldn't let us do that. They knew better than to let a bunch of college students try and do something like that. Would have been a disaster. But apparently the antenna is still up there. I'm surprised to find.
It is, and I think some people might have went up and saw a little bit of it today, or the next floor or whatever. So that was pretty cool, and yeah, I mean, I looked at some pictures of it. I wasn't here for the start of it, but we're trying to pay homage to how the station looked, and we have some cool artifacts from the station over the years, pictures, and then I don't know if have you been downstairs yet? There's some more artifacts and stuff down there.
Yeah, we came in downstairs, and one story about that is you had one of the articles you had mentioned Mike Delfonso, and he was our first chief engineer. The first night, I think it was probably April of '69, we'd gotten a license to do some kind of testing, program testing or something, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and 3 of us climbed up to the top of the bell tower, and Mike Delfonso, it's a long way up there, seems like about 30 feet. He got about 3/4 of the way up, and some pigeons. He scared some pigeons out of the wall. And it scared the daylights out of me, and I was still on the ground. Somehow he held on. Otherwise, they might have canceled the whole radio station.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, first of all, for your leadership and getting things set up and really creating just such great memories for all of us that followed after you. So thank you.
It was great fun.
All right. And next up, we've got Bob Lewis. First of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You guys done a great job putting this all together. You and your team, great.
I'll tell you what, Zach definitely led the charge, but we appreciate that. So, Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience here at WJCU.
Well, again, I was a sophomore here in 1968, and I saw this notice on the board downstairs in the ad building that the radio club was meeting. And I thought, well, it's kind of interesting. I wasn't particularly committed to any major at the time. I thought it was amateur radio, like Morse code and stuff like that. So I come up here. There's Milt and Mike Delfonso, and they got this commercial radio equipment, turntables, board. I said, this is a real radio. You're just talking about radio, not just, Morse code. Yep. And I was here when he went on the air the first day in June of 1969 as one of the first voices on the air. The very first voice was our then program director named Bill Butala. We had a folk music show from 6 to 8. We had a jazz show from 8 to 10, which I did co-hosting with a guy named Helmut Curling. And then Mike Delfonso came on from 10 to midnight and did hard rock. And that was the very first shows on June of 1969, and it grew from there. I took over as the director in January of 1970 and really pushed the growth. We had the second studio built. We added an AM campus station, which is a separate broadcast entity altogether, which was commercial. We made money with that, actually sold advertising time, and really tried to set the seeds for the station to grow. Reached out to the community. We had a program with the local high school, Shaker in Cleveland Heights, for seniors to come and intern with us. and again, trying to bring that community into the radio station. And it was a heck of a lot of fun, and it started me in a 50-year-plus professional career in broadcasting. By my senior year, I was already on the air doing a morning show at one of the local FM stations. So I owe everything to this place.
And you're still on air to this day.
I certainly am. WNIR FM 100.1, Talker, Ohio.
I heard you had a very good looking guest on. I think it was on Sunday.
If we had TV, we would have had #1 ratings.
Yeah.
Zach came on and we talked about this program, and he talked about all his efforts. And again, I'm just so happy to be able to promote this. And again, I'm so impressed that young people like you are interested at all in the history of this station. I mean, here we are, a bunch of guys who could be your grandparents, and yet you have an interest in the history, and it's a noble history of what is, I think, a noble, great radio station, and I really hope it continues for generations to come.
Yeah, I do as well, and I'm a real fan of WJCU, and I have been since I got here. Same thing, I saw an advertisement for it. I walked in one day, and I'll tell my story a little bit later, but it's really cool, and it has professionally opened up a lot of doors, like you said, because I'm now working commercial as well, so hopefully I'm on a morning show before I graduate here, but
and where will you be 50 years from now?
That is the question.
That's a cool concept.
Yeah, exactly. If anyone has any guesses, come on up. I'm kidding. And then we also have one other guest here. So Phil Thomas.
I'm Phil Thomas.
Welcome.
I was part of the original staff. I remember we had a group of about 25 people that came up here for that first meeting. And we became wonderful WABU radio at the time, because that was the call letters that the FCC gave us. Later on, as we became WUJC, the Plain Dealer once called us Cleveland's biggest little 10-watt station. And we were kind of ahead of other stations, even on the FM band, that were commercial stations, because we didn't have to compete. Like Bob mentioned, we could have jazz at 1 hour and folk music in the next hour. We didn't have to have any set pattern. We were on only usually sometimes from maybe 2 in the afternoon to 2 in the morning. And the nice thing about that, because I was a commuter at the time, I got a parking pass to park right in front of the building so I can get out of here at 2 o'clock. And I later became the sports director and did the first sports broadcast for John Carroll basketball and football. And that was only thanks to a man by the name of Fissinger, who was the director of development at that time, because he gave money for us to be able to spend to take John Carroll sports on the road. And made it nice to do that. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have done any sports those first couple years. Later on, I became the program director, and we had some interesting guests over time. One of them was John Denver, who was right here at that time when he came up. My biggest regret is that I didn't tape the interview that I did with him. And but he came up. We had Greg Morris from the television show Mission Impossible, Dr. Spock, who wrote the book on babies. So we would have a lot of people come up because they saw that we reached a lot of people. And it was an eclectic group of listeners that we had. So on Saturday nights, we had a gentleman by the name of John Fabry, who I always remembered, who's passed away since then, but he was kind of the forerunner of Trevisano. And we would come up here and have just a talk fest with him in the news studio at the time. And people would come up and visit us. Not only that, but we were the only ones that have a pop machine. So we had a lot of people from downstairs that would come up here and get popped, because it was only a quarter at the time. And it was a great time. The one thing Bob and I were talking about, when one of the sports broadcasts that we did was a basketball game at Case Western Reserve, and usually they put our board and everything right next down on the floor. Well, this time they put it up in a closet upstairs, and I got there and I called Bob and I said, Bob, there's going to be no sound from the crowd here. And Bob said, I'll take care of it. And so I did the broadcast, and at that time you only heard what you were doing. You didn't hear what was going over the air. So I came back to the studio, and everybody's laughing. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, Bob played the sound effects, but it was a sound effects for a football game. And so you hear, every time John Carroll scored, you heard, hold that line. So those were some of the things that, the memories that I had here. And it was a great time. I ended up working for a while at WGCL, and then later on at WJCU as part of the last group that worked at WJCU before it turned into Magic and DOK, and did some television broadcasting as a on-the-air broadcaster for Channel 8 at that time too. So
Cool. And yeah, I mean, you said that you guys had all those great guests come up here and stuff like that, and we're hoping to follow in your footsteps of that. We've been doing that. We had last year we had the Temptations, the last living member of the Temptations, come on, which was really cool. Otis Williams, and so like same thing. They see an interest in WJCU, and they have then, and they still do now. So
yeah, well, we were at the forefront when everybody was going to FM radio at the time. Okay, so we were kind of in that mix. We had. As Bob mentioned, we had two groups of people that worked here, and there was a group that loved Top 40 radio, and there was a group that loved the album-oriented rock.
Yeah.
So what we did is we set up two segments of our station. One of the segments was broadcast as a closed circuit to the Student Activity Center and also on 590 AM, right? And as Bob said, that one sold commercials.
Yeah.
So you could make money on that. So we had the two groups in there, and the old studio here was for them, and the other studio was for the FM side. So, and the Belkins loved us. They used to. The Belkins were the promoters of a lot of the concerts that they had in Cleveland, and they used to give us tickets all the time because they knew that we would play the music of the people that were coming in for the concerts.
Yeah.
And so that's why some of the people would come up here also.
Yeah, and you said in our interview the other day that it used to be 6 to 12, just like our show is tonight, and then it expanded to 3 to 12, and then 3 to 2 or something like that, and then eventually we're 24 hours now.
Right.
So that's really cool, and we're playing music at all hours of the night and all times of the day. But yeah, we appreciate you guys coming on today.
Thank you for having us.
We're gonna get back to some music here, but we'll be taking some more guests and talking and hearing some more stories throughout this show. This is the one and only WJCU.